Andrew is our coordinator in the Atlantic Canada, so he oversees all the Maritimes, Halifax, Nova Scotia, PEI, Fredericton, Newfoundland. Now, not all of those places do we have chapters, but Andrew is working on building great connections. He has a designability background and is always, it's forefront of his mind for inclusion for everybody and accessibility for all. And I guess, Andrew, that's why you thought Tetra was a good fit for you.
Yes, I did. And it turns out it is. So
well, we're really glad to hear that. I'm going to leave the presentation in Andrew's capable hands. So without further ado, Andrew Jantzen, our Atlantic Regional Coordinator.
Thanks, Eric. Can people see my screen here? I've got a Word document open.
Yes, we can. It says projects for every, we can see it, Andrew.
Great. So I just put this in a Word document because my my dictation software doesn't work for PowerPoint, but it should do the same trick. So yeah, I thought today, I mean, I was in some of the talks earlier and mostly I caught the captioning because some of my audio wasn't working, but it sounds like we've talked through some projects if you've been part of some of the previous presentations. But today in this one, I'd like to kind of introduce a lot more. I want to give you a sense of the wide range of projects that are possible and some of the resources that we have available to make those happen. So, just to review, at Tetra, we provide individuals living with disabilities opportunities to expand environments by addressing and removing these barriers. And we do that by creating assistive devices. And we've been doing that for about 30 years over that. And the number of projects that we've done in that time is don't even know what the number is, but it's massive. And we have some examples that are available. And today, our objectives, as I talked about a little bit, are to learn about the range of the different projects, to get a better understanding of what are those resources, like the skills and experience and expertise from volunteers that we have, and to kind of, I hope at least, that people leave feeling a little bit more equipped to think about projects either for yourself or people in your communities, and to know where to start. So, and yeah, if people have questions, you know, either pop them in the chat or there'll be some time at the end for that as well. Questions are great. It's always helpful with Tetra to ask questions because that's where projects usually start. So what is a Tetra project? We've talked about this at various points today. Some of the things about them are that they're usually very unique and custom to people's needs and wants. They can be designed from scratch, or they can be modifications on pre-made products, and they're requested by people. So they're things that people want and need, but your needs are the focus. So I personally have a project that was made for me, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And there's no other one like it. It's unique in that sense. And the last thing on the list there is that our products, our projects are all pay what you can. It's all based on what is affordable to people. And if that is not anything, then you don't pay anything. So we want to make things as accessible as possible here. And we really hope that we are able to do that for as many people as possible. Where can you find examples of Tetra products? So in some of the other talks today, we've mentioned Tetranation, which is a yearly initiative that we've been doing for a couple of years that highlights projects from over the year. And these come in the form of videos. They're short clips that some of them have the person who the project is for in them. Some of them don't, but often people really like to share these things. There's some examples a little bit later on of what some of those were. This year we had the most number of examples to see in Tetranation ever, and we always hope to grow that for the next year. Tetra Base, which Eric mentioned in the previous presentation and is talking about right now in a different stream, is an online resource on our website that has examples of projects, but it also includes things like the materials, instructions on how to make them, usually a cost estimate, so that you can go and you can look at that and say, oh, well, my need is a little bit similar to that. Why don't we take that, start from there, and modify it for my needs? So there's a lot of really great starting points there, even if it's not something that exists there already. It's a good place to start. So there's photos a little bit later, but just for some kind of names of different ones to get you thinking, a few of the Tetranation projects that had a lot of different views and people were checking these ones out. The first one on the list here is a service dog feeder. So this was a device that had been broken at one point and was fixed and modified so it worked better. There's the hands-free walker, which I'll show you a photo of later, which is an example of one that we took an existing assistive device that's very, typical device, made a very small modification, and all of a sudden the person could use it. But before that, it really wasn't functional at all. And there's some examples of sports-related things and kid-related, child carrier, which was one that's attached to a wheelchair, another modification on a current device. So let's get into what some of these things are more like. Okay, there's some more examples of names here. So I'm going to give you some examples of different kind of areas of life that some of these touch on. So here we have a couple of categories. These are just ones that I've created, so these aren't actually categories that we use. I'm just trying to give you a sense of the variety. So I kind of looked at them and saw that there's a lot that are related to daily living. So that might be things like eating or going to the washroom, showering, getting around, that kind of thing. Recreation and sports is one where we usually get a lot of projects, and there's some really neat ones coming up later to show you. I gave an example of something in the trades and engineering field because there are a lot of things that people want to do that really access and accessibility are very limited in that area. So, there are a lot of volunteers who work in these areas. So to think about ways to adapt them, we have volunteers who have disabilities, who are in trades and engineering, who want to be able to offer those things to other people. And by a small Tetra modification, people can continue doing either something that they used to be able to do and they want to do again, or try it for the first time even. So that's an area that I'm really proud that we can do. I am an engineering person. I have done electronic engineering and physics, and I love doing that kind of thing. And my disability makes that very challenging. So for me, this area is so, so important to make sure that we're covering. Music and cultural, we have lots of different things in that area. We also do look at technology and gaming, electronics, and also the last one here I've listed is community. And that one, I'll give an example of what I mean by that, but I think of that as ways that we can get out and engage in community and participate as groups or in larger things. So that's one thing that I also thought was important to include in my list here. So some examples of the daily living ones. Here's one from Tetranation that I thought was really cool, that we didn't always have the ability to do a project like this, but this one is a voice activated lift. And the person who this is for, there's a woman here that there's a YouTube video that I've included an embedded link here, which we can see if will work from here. But there's a woman pictured, there's a lift that is on her lap and a sling. She's using a wheelchair, and this lift is now voice activated. So there's an Alexa device that's now linked to it. And the device itself wasn't actually modified itself. Like all of the safety features are still there. Nothing was changed so that, you know, there's going to be any risk to that in that sense. But the woman can now just say, Alexa, go, and it just lifts up and moves to the right direction. And, you know, she tells it to stop, and it stops, and she can lower it. But it's meant to do that work because with her getting to the toilet, she needs to be able to use her hands to balance and move that way and not have to control the lift to do that. Without this device, it's a lot more difficult to do. So let's see if this link works here. I'm just gonna fast forward to a bit later in the video where you can actually, all right. So to just able to navigate the bathroom, and that's such a both simple thing, important thing, and really significant. So yeah, this one to me was a great one to start with. All right, I think probably got the idea there. I have an Alexa in my home. They're really great. I can turn the lights on and off. I can control my dehumidifier. There's different projects that we've done across Canada that use existing tech like this that didn't used to exist to really easily make things more accessible in people's homes. And during COVID, that's also very, very important. Next on the list here, I have, this is a cup holder that was made for someone, but I also just want to mention that there's a lot of these attachments or holders that we do, either cup holders, phone holders, umbrella holders, cane holders, whatever it might be, something that just, even a camera holder, someone who wants to do film and video. There are so many different things that we can do with our current assistive devices, just with a little bit of modification. So this one was actually, there's an example later on, but Tetra has been making these kind of cup holders before they really existed on the market. I think that's really neat to point out. Like there's examples of these kinds of things we've been doing for decades. And now there's a lot more that exists that we can use, but we really actually, in some ways, we're at the forefront of cup holder development. So here's an example of that in use. There's a young girl in a power wheelchair that has this stainless steel tin that has a water bottle in it now that's mounted to the back of her chair. This little video clip here, some of these I'm giving examples of because they're ones that are, I find cool because they'd be helpful for myself as well. I'm just gonna turn the music off because it's quite loud. There's no audio in the video, but there's some text that just explains this is it's a four-arm walker, and this woman doesn't have any hands. She controls the walker with her stumps. She wasn't able to operate the brakes beforehand, and all that they did was they took a piece of wood and just mounted it to the brakes, and now she can just push and pull that bar that goes across the top of the walker between the brakes, and just like that, now she can brake, and that's a very important safety feature with the walker. I have learned that in my own experience. So yeah, So that's an example also on Tetranation that you can check out. I did want to show that one because we do have a lot of projects that are examples that have wheelchairs that are involved in them, but that's just one area of what we do, and walkers are another part of that, but it's all different assistive tech, you know. So daily living, mobility is one aspect, also the kitchen and eating, and this one is an example of something that was done to make food prep easier. So it's a one-handed cutting board, and they've modified this so that there's a slot for the food to go in. I think maybe I included a photo that has a piece of celery in it. So there's a piece of celery in the slot, and that just holds it in place so that when the user is trying to cut it, things aren't sliding around, and that's it's much easier to do food prep that way. So this is an example of a type of woodworking project that we do. Some of the other ones were kind of like mechanical aspects, but this one, someone who's very familiar with wood can easily put something like that together. This one's really neat. I like this project. I mean, I like them all, they're all neat. But this one is an example of one that they took some existing devices that weren't really intended for this and adapted them for something else. So in this photo, this is a picture of a shower head, and the device is meant so that someone can easily wash their hair. I have to flip to my other document to remember what, oops, sorry. I don't have it open right now because my computer shut down right before this, but I will do my best to remember. I believe this was for another person who I think had use of one arm and wanted something so that they could independently wash their hair. So there's these, how would you describe them? There's like these silicone kind of scrubber type things that are slid onto the shower head and are mounted on the wall behind it too, so that someone could get close enough and rub your head against those to wash your hair that way. And there's a soap dispenser that's attached to that automatically gets the shampoo out too. So yeah, neat. Family. One aspect that was touched on in a lot of different points of today is that Tetra projects are for people of all ages, and that starts when people are born. So parents come to Tetra for a lot of different things to help at that point. We've seen some cribs that were modified earlier today. This one is, there's a man pictured here, and there's a bouncer that's mounted on the front of his manual wheelchair, and there's a little tiny baby in there. He's smiling. Well, the man's smiling. It's kind of hard to tell if the baby's smiling or not. And they're in a cozy living room here. And I think this one was one of the Atlantic projects that happened that I'm not sure is up on our Tetra base yet, but yeah, this is one that is a more recent in the last couple of years. So, recreation and sports. This to me is another really great area that we are involved in. One thing out here in Atlantic Canada that I have noticed is that a lot of our rec programs are not running during COVID. And so I think about Tetra and the ways that we can jump in and fill that. So this one is a project where there's a young man who was looking for ways to continue doing kind of physical activity. And so they developed this vertical exerciser jumper so that he can exercise at home. It's kind of like a harness that's mounted to the ceiling. And I forget if it was a kind of a parachute harness that was adapted, but different kinds of, again, pre-made or existing things that were just adapted using sewing, and probably there's some different handiness that went into making that mount to the ceiling, but it makes something that someone can use every day to get a little bit more activity into their life and yeah, move around. And moving around, especially when you're trapped at home, is really important and can give a lot back to our daily lives. So this one, the next one here is a compound bow stand that was made. There's a young man in a wheelchair here pictured with our Memorial University chapter coordinator. There's a compound bow that's mounted horizontal here on a welded stand. And compound bows, they are one of those bows that's really, it takes a lot of force to pull them back. And I'm not sure what was developed here, but it's fully adapted for this young man to use it. So it's I don't know where the clubs are in Newfoundland, but there's definitely some opportunities for archery. Here's a design for a kayak transfer bench that was made. I don't know which chapter this was, but kayaking and paddling and that kind of thing. There's a lot of these projects that have been made. One out in BC because of some of the other recreation programs that the Disability Foundation is connected with, societies as a part of the Disability Foundation, but also in other places in Canada. There's, once there's one kayak transfer bench, there can be more kayak transfer benches. So this design here, there's a photo below of the actual bench, and you can see it's highly customized. All of these pieces are welded together. This is not a device that was pre-made and modified. This is made from scratch here. So it's made to be the same height as the chair, so that people can move easily from a chair to the kayak. So I know that in Halifax here, we just had an accessible dock that was put in. So this type of thing right now seems to be, there's lots of push for it and lots of opportunities for us to jump in and help out. So remember at the beginning when I mentioned engineering and tech and trades? Well, this example here is a really simple modification of a lathe. I believe this is a wood lathe. There's two photos. There's one where there's a man in a manual wheelchair pictured on the left, and on the right is just the lathe. And the photo on the right, the lathe is significantly taller. So this modification, it was simply just making it shorter so that he could access it at the right height. So something like that, that's not something that it probably doesn't take very long to do that, doesn't take a lot of resources, but it's a custom job that is something that our volunteers can very easily take on. I mean, depending on who's at the chapter, but it definitely fits what we do. Music and cultural opportunities. This is an example of a small modification where they just took a wrist splint and attached different pieces to it that holds a guitar pick. This was the person's hand with ability to grip the pick there. They needed a different way to do that. So the glove allows them to do that without fingers involved. And for me, I have that same kind of challenge for different reasons. And I think about this and think, okay, well, maybe I could play guitar again. That's definitely something that, I haven't thought about a lot, but once I see that it's possible, that, it might change what I want to do. So here's a close-up of it. You can kind of see it's very prototype level. We've taped together different devices here, but it does the job. Another music one, I believe Eric showed this in the previous presentation, was a modified recorder. This can be played with one hand with the modification. So I don't think I have a close-up of this one. But the photo here shows there's a bunch of different pieces that connect to the holes of the recorder. And there's a piece that goes around this young man's neck so that he can hold and use fingers on one hand to control the holes for the sounds and hold onto it with the neck, and there you go. We do a fair amount of projects in the realm of music. Different guitar projects are quite common, either for strumming or using people's feet even to control different devices that might be people are looking to do again. Or not necessarily music, but in the realm of technology, gaming, and TV, there are lots of different possibilities. And one here's pictured, this is a Wii remote that was modified. I do wish I had my other notes open because this is one that I don't quite remember what the modification was, but there's 3 different photos here, and I wanted to show this because it gives an example of, you think about what's possible with what Tetra has, and here they've actually taken apart the controller and modified the electronic circuit board with some of the buttons involved and made changes to that level. So it's not just, adding things to the outside of something or changing it that way. We have people who have those skills in electronics that can make those modifications. There's another example, which I don't have a photo of here, but was a kid's toy that was taken apart and some large push buttons added so a kid could play with his favorite toy independently. This one is, I do believe this is a phone. It might be a remote if I'm not remembering correctly, but this one is, I really wanted to show this one because of the example earlier of the cup holder and how we've been doing that for so long. This is a phone holder it's made out of wood. It's mounted to this person's bed so that it's above their face so they can look up and see what's happening there. But usually these devices are not made out of wood. And the reason is that really this one was made quite a while ago. And we've been doing it since then and have learned a lot in the process. But again, like the way that we can do this is by doing it custom for a person. So you can't always find a plastic device somewhere that's going to meet those needs, but you might be able to make it out of something else. One area that is related to why I got connected to Tetra was through work, and not in the sense of where I am now of working for Tetra, but just trying to do work. So this is a different example of what someone was doing for work, but I don't know if this is the person themselves or the volunteer, but this one was to find a way for this person who was delivering papers to be able to carry the papers and hand them out. And they have a device that is kind of mounted here to the bottom of a vest with clothespins that clip onto the newspapers so that they don't have to hold onto those and can, on the route, just pull them off and drop them off to people that way. So, that is making somebody's work more accessible with a device that otherwise, I really don't know where you would find something like that. I can't think of anywhere other than Tetra. For me, the device was maybe a little bit more like close to something that you could potentially find. Another picture of me. I'm not wearing that same shirt in this picture, but I am using the same workstation. So this is what I'm looking at right now. You're on this screen here. And I have this device here. I can't use this keyboard anymore, so that's not there. I'm actually using my wheelchair joystick and a net clay to control my computer. But the reason I needed this is that I couldn't get up to a regular desk because when I'm using my power chair, I need to be at least partially reclined because of my physical condition. So I can't actually do that underneath a flat regular desk. As soon as I start to tilt, my knees hit the table and I can no longer get up close enough to be able to control anything. So this workstation instead is beside me. So there's this tower right here that my computer sits on, and there is a computer monitor attachment that's mounted to that, and I have a secondary monitor that I can then drive underneath and control it that way. So this is something where it's like, yeah, these things exist, a monitor mount exists, but it didn't quite work. So we had to make some small changes, but it just ended up being easier to do it that way. I didn't include too many examples of this, but I wanted to at least put it in here, is that sometimes Tetra projects are, I mean, the kayak stand earlier is another example that's kind of like this, but sometimes projects are for, individual people, but they're part of programs, or they're for programs in itself. So this one here was for, what's the name of this sport? Is it called Bocce Ball, or what's the name of it? Somebody has that. Anyway, it's a sport where you're rolling these little balls into a space, and the device that was made here is an inclined ramp with a way to adjust the angle so that people who are a variety of heights, including people who are in wheelchairs or use wheelchairs, sorry, I use a wheelchair that is a little bit higher, so this would mean that I'd be able to adjust it so I could reach to put the ball in there to roll it down myself, or with a very little amount of help. And they just needed more of them. So sometimes it's a device that Tetra was involved in doing to support a program like this, so that we can engage as communities of people together, or with other people in general. But it's something that might not be for one person, it might be for a group of people. So here's an actual group of people pictured doing that. Come back up a little. Where they're all participating in this sport, and this means that that's possible. So I don't have photos of these, but a couple of other examples of that are the gardening programs, where we've built gardening boxes that are either easier for people to get up to, or tools that are adapted for different kinds of use. Sailing programs where we've designed different devices to go on the water that will work with that, or the hiking trail rider wheelchair that was shown earlier, which has been developed over the years to a quite high level to become a Tetra device. But that is usable by lots of different people. So that's a lot of examples. I just talked for a long time there about a bunch of options, and that's not nearly all of them. That's just a few examples. But I wanted to point out a couple of things about that, is that Tetra projects are really, we try to do as much as possible for as many people in a way that really meets individual needs. And like I said, it's not just mobility. Even though you may have seen Tetra projects for people who use wheelchairs, that's not what we do. This is for everyone. Online is only a small fraction of what we do. And really, it's about what you need. So let us know what we can do for you. Like we have resources and people to support with that. But it's not about us. It's about what you need. And all needs are valid. It doesn't matter how small or how complicated something might seem, because even if it seems like that, it might not be to a volunteer who has that particular skill set. But it might be, I think of, things for myself where I, at one point just put on a simple handle to a light switch. And that is a simple project, but it's also a custom project that can easily make someone's life so much easier. So it's not too small, something like that can easily be a Tetra project, and it's okay to, and totally encouraged to submit things like that as well. it's never too early or too late. Whether you've been thinking about this for a long time or right now, and if somebody is a baby or is in their 80s and 90s, doesn't matter. We work with anyone. Submit your project or give us a call and we can talk about it and go from there. But we do want to try and reach as many different people as possible. So what are the resources that we have available to do this? To give you a sense of that, now that we've seen a lot of these different examples of projects, and just kind of run through a few of those examples. So usually the people involved, they're not necessarily all tech and trades people. They're just people who are handy and creative and like to problem solve, and who might have some familiarity with putting things together, building something physical or even a digital item like programming. Some of it is repair jobs or household tasks. Those things fit with what we do depending on what it is. So below here, here's some more specifics. So I know that in one of our chapters, I know someone who's a bike mechanic who's involved. He's very handy with how things are put together and how they are mounted or different ways of connecting things. We've seen some examples of carpentry or electronics, things that are welded or machined. We didn't really show a lot here, but there are 3D printing skills that are also present with our volunteers. People who can bring skills from physio and occupational therapy, all different ways of understanding how things move and what is out there as options that might already exist. People who like to tinker, hobbyists. I used to do that a lot of the time, and that's something where there's so much creative problem solving involved, where it's definitely a handy thing to have. I like really connecting with people in the arts as volunteers because there's, again, so much creativity there. I like to think of how, props and things like that, the skills that people are using to do that are also the same ones that our tech and trades people have. So, the types of volunteers and people involved can bridge all these different areas. My uncle's a farmer and he's made more things for my wheelchair than I can count. So farmers, construction builders, students, teams, even there's a lot of projects that include sewing. So, what else can you think of, even if it's something we don't currently have, if you have a project that might involve that, we'll try and find it. So we are pretty well through the projects and all the things that I wanted to talk about. I just wanted to put these things up here to give you a couple of prompts to think on of if there's things that you wanted to have as projects. So this is entitled Opportunities, Dreams, and Potential. And with Tetra, you really do get to dream up your future. What do you wish was possible? What barriers are in your environment that you might, what would happen if we could remove those? If you could think of one thing in your day-to-day that you want to be able to do on your own that you can't right now, what would that be? Or even returning to an activity, or trying something new, any of those things. So, these things are all different prompts. They're not meant to be things that you need to answer right now or that you need to, decide even before you come to us. You can always come and even just talk through things. So that's what we're here. We're here to imagine. Tetra's here to bring the skills and resources to make these ideas possible. That's where we come in. So we're here for that creative process, and that's one thing that I love doing, and why I really think that what Tetra does is so important, and why I think I'm really dedicated to what we do because of it. So yeah, how does it work? How does it work when you have your idea? Well, all you do is just come with your idea to us. There's an application form on our website, which is just tetrasociety.org. The form is right at the top of the page. There's a menu where you can navigate to the submit an RFA. Those forms, when you submit them, they go to our chapter coordinators, and someone will be in touch from there to go about next steps. Other than that, it's, you know, contacting either local people, your chapter coordinator, or Eric in head office, or the regional people, and just have a conversation, chat about, you know, what might be possible. So yeah, I think that is, did I have anything else on here? Just the RFA page, and knowing that if you have any issues with the forms, or you'd just like to have some support in filling that out, that is available. You can always contact us for that. But yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about today. So if people have any questions or comments, things, if you're involved with Tetra and you want to add something to that, or you're new and you have something that you're wondering about, now's the time.
Andrew, question about funding.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those projects that you've put out there, there's, I wouldn't say a large amount, but there's some amount of resources, like you have to buy materials and that kind of stuff. How do you actually deal with this? Is it something that you automatically refer to the local coordinator, or do you have like a list of resources within the community